burst of convection that really gets things going here with the center. But you can definitely see the center here on the radar, and it's not that big, but it's just the dry air wrapping into it. The center is actually right here, but this is all that dry air.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange to see that much split. I mean, that convection north is actually more impressive looking right now than what we're seeing right around the eye.
Yeah, and
Very broad
you
line.
you got to remember also, this is, the Brownsville radar's here, so you're shooting, probably 150 or 200 miles offshore here, and so the radar beam is shooting up in the air, and
Yeah.
so you might not be sampling some of the deeper convection here. It's interesting, the recon's been out there, and you can see here the greens and the blues here on the west side. They're showing some lighter winds, so not as strong of the winds on the west side. The reds and the yellows and the oranges are the stronger wind speeds, and you can see here even well out on the southeast side of the system. And so we're starting to get that, what I would say is probably what's going to come up toward the northern Gulf Coast, is kind of a lopsided system where all the weather is going to be off to the east, and eventually more and more of this dry air gets entrained on the west side. The pressure here, 989, 989, 987. So very slowly strengthening a little bit. The pressure continues to fall a little bit. And you can also see the plots here, the pressure are off to the northeast now. So it's finally made that turn, that right turn we've been waiting on, off to the northeast, and it will begin to accelerate quickly now to the northeast over the coming hours as a trough. We'll talk about that in a minute, as a trough comes in from the west.
Yeah, and that was. Do we have that satellite, Jeff? That of the trough coming in the west. We'll get to that in a second. Here's the official track forecast, and there has been some changes since this morning. It looks like a lot of the tropical storm watch for the Texas coast has dropped. Now we see that yellow shaded area starting around Matagorda Bay to High Island, then a tropical storm warning from High Island to the Sabine River, and then a hurricane warning that hasn't changed at all right there for the southern Louisiana coast, and then a tropical storm warning from around New Orleans now all the way over to the Mississippi Alabama border, and then just a very small tropical storm watch area there for I guess that's around Gulf Shores and Orange there in Alabama. So a lot of that has either gone away or shifted over. Still forecast to become a hurricane by 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. That next mark right there, and then making landfall sometime around 7 o'clock Wednesday evening, and then kind of turning north as it moves inland. So there are some changes in that forecast track since we've seen that earlier this morning.
Yep, the old east shifts continue. In the Gulf of Mexico, right tracks tend to sometimes win out. Interestingly enough, look at the slowdown up here that we're starting to see, and we're starting to see some interesting in some of the longer range models up here in the mid Mississippi Valley. But look at this slowing down Thursday to Saturday, only moving from northern Mississippi to maybe over into southern Missouri. So if this remains somewhat of a coherent system and low pressure and all that, we could be dealing with some significant rains up through this area. But it's interesting that what you see on some of the guidance, and we'll eventually get to that. But this is what we call the water vapor, and so this shows the really moist air in white and the really dry air and the darker black colors. But it's also really good at picking out features in the atmosphere, kind of steering features. And so here's our hurricane tropical storm down here off the South Texas coast. And if you notice this kind of blip right here over Big Bend up into West Texas, this is what we call a shortwave trough. And this trough is digging into Texas, and this is what is going to lift our tropical system off to the northeast and eventually the east northeast. You can kind of see how this trough is curling in here. And that is why it's not going to come back to the northwest or make landfall anywhere here along the Texas coast. And if we look at the GFS model, you can really see this trough in the 500 millibar flow. So this is the upper level flow, mid upper level flow. And you can see the wind barbs here from the northeast curling around. So this is a cyclonic flow. We got a trough right through here and tropical system down here to the southeast of that trough. And if we go in forward in time, you can watch that trough moves east and it kind of slingshots our tropical system up towards the Louisiana coast and kind of picks it up and catches it. So not only is it going to turn northeast, which it's made, but it's going to accelerate to the northeast as it gets into this flow here around this trough. And so pretty common how tropical systems kind of recurve into the United States, and then it kind of picks up the system and turns it back to the north. And let's see here, yeah, kind of almost stalls it out, maybe even involves into the trough. So this is almost looking like some sort of a 500 millibar cutoff low or trough here over the mid Mississippi Valley. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves, and then it kind of slowly drifts off to the east. But a lot of questions of, how and why can this not come back to Texas? Well, that's why, because we have this trough coming in from the west that is going to push it and pick it up. And you can see the model guidance generally in good agreement now, a little bit of a shift. I tell you what, if I'm in New Orleans, I'm watching this closely because you could be dealing with some hurricane conditions in New Orleans by tomorrow night. So lot better here, better conditions in Louisiana, Lake Charles, maybe even Lafayette's going to get off okay. But over here in Southeast Louisiana, Morgan City, down towards Homa, Grand Isle, down in Plaquemines, Metro New Orleans, Slidell, these areas are going to take that eastern front quadrant. And like I mentioned, not only is the GFS showing this slowdown, but look at these other models now with some craziness, if you will, as you get up into northern Mississippi, kind of running to a blocking high up here. And we'll see what all happens. You see NHC here kind of pushing it on north, but I don't know. We'll see. It may slow down a lot sooner. And when you do that, the steering kind of clap, you can get to some weird shenanigans with this type of stuff. So anyways, key today is look out New Orleans. You could be in for some gusty times tomorrow night.
Yeah, be interesting to see what the QPF models are showing right now for southern Missouri, Indiana, northeastern Arkansas, when it slows down up there. I mean, it is really just not much beyond there. So looks like it's going to come to a screeching halt, and hopefully we'll not have a lot of rain. Speaking of rain, we have a question from Ivy out of Beaumont. How much rain will Beaumont be getting? And I know we have the rain graphic, I'm sure, coming up. But I would.
Oh, I wouldn't expect a whole lot in Beaumont. I don't know why I can't find my stuff right now, of course. But there it is. Yeah, I wouldn't expect a whole lot in Beaumont. Maybe you might be doing good to get an inch of rain over there in the Beaumont area, and we can turn on the 5-day and look here. But I don't think it's going to be that much.
Yeah, we went at least in the Houston area. We were the model was showing like less than a half an inch. So maybe an inch or two. Again,
Maybe.
tropical systems can be kind of funny with their bands, the way they set up and can train and that kind of stuff. But anything on the eastern side of that Iowa, which is where Beaumont is not likely to get a lot. There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
that
not going to get
model's,
much.
yeah.
You've had more on a thunderstorm in the afternoon than what you're going to get from Beryl, or not Beryl, what you're going to get from Francine.
Right.
And even over here in Louisiana, again, accelerating in landfall. So the storm's moving faster and faster. You're not going to get a lot. You can see these rainfall totals are, yes, they could cause some flooding, but you're generally talking 5 to 7 inches of rain here in Southeast Louisiana. Again, southern Louisiana, this is not an uncommon rainfall for these folks down here, even into Mississippi. So yeah, you're gonna have some street flooding. Biggest issue may be around the New Orleans area, where you obviously get into a pumping situation with the rainfall water, and so they can only pump so much per hour and all that kind of stuff. And so street flooding could be an issue here in the New Orleans area. We haven't talked any bit about the storm surge flooding over here, and that's something definitely to mention.
Yeah.
Probably able to start chopping away a little bit here on the west side. Probably not going to get much surge here, but we're watching these values go up over the very vulnerable southeastern Louisiana and the Mississippi coast. And so you can see with the storm coming in like this, the wind is coming in from the southeast. There's nowhere for the water to go here. And so now we're talking 3 to 5 feet Lake Pontchartrain, southern Mississippi coast, Biloxi, Waveland, all the way over to Gulfport. Definitely down here on the Delta, 4 to 7 feet from Port Fourchon, all the way over to the mouth of Mississippi. So this is the west side of Plaquemines Parish. And then if the storm does come in here around Vermilion Bay, a little bit south, Homa and Morgan City, potentially that is where we're going to see some of the maximum push into this area. So if you've been with us the last couple of days, the colors have been shifting east. And look at this now up here on the
Yeah.
north side of Pontchartrain. Look at that. We're talking 3, maybe even a 6 feet up here west of Mandeville, and into some of the St. John the Baptiste parish over here. This is very surge prone area. It's very shallow, and the water can come really far inland. You can see here south of Hammond and way back over here to the west. Everything you see here in this hashed color is the federal hurricane protection levee system around New Orleans. So this protects the metropolitan area out to St. Bernard and then down some into Plaquemines. You can see some of this levied stuff down here. There's not a lot down here. And then some over here to the west. But you can see a lot of this is going to be inundated with storm surge. A lot of this is marshland. And I did want to point out up here on the Mississippi coast, we're talking potentially 6 feet up here into the Bay St. Louis, Diamond Head, past Christiane area at the head of the bay here. And this is extraordinarily storm surge prone area. Anytime you get a tropical storm or a hurricane in this area. So evacuation orders, recommendations are in place for a lot of these locations down here outside of the protection systems. And I want to be very straightforward. I've been down in this area. I've done surveys down here, Hurricane Ida back in I think it was 2021. And there's a difference between the federal levee protection and the local levee protection. And a lot of times these local levees that have been built by local levee districts and some other agencies are not quite to the height or the standards of the federal protection. And so just because you're protected by a levee doesn't mean you're safe. And so just to be clear, the evacuation orders in this area recommendations are for those outside of the federal protection system. These little back levees and local levees are easily overtopped. Some of them are only 3 or 4 feet high, and the water's just going to go right over the top of them. And so don't be fooled by these little levees down here and stuff like that. And depending on how the track goes, this water is going to come up some of the bayous and the low rivers here in southern Louisiana. So don't sleep on this. It's going to come quick. Tomorrow morning, preparations need to be done by this evening down here. The 40-mile-an-hour winds are coming in tomorrow morning, and that water level rise and that push of water up towards the coast after probably noon tomorrow, and then really coming up to the coast tomorrow afternoon as the center kind of comes in. And we're going to have storm surge flooding here all night tomorrow night over to the Mississippi coast. So get ready. Again, kind of the big news today, New Orleans, look out. Hurricane conditions certainly on the table potentially for you for tomorrow night.
Yeah, big metropolitan area. Speaking of wind, we have a question from Lauren. She has family over in Lafayette. How high are the winds going to get in Lafayette? Now that's a interesting question, because that's an interesting spot right now, because that really depends on where that eye comes in and what side of the eye Lafayette will be on. I mean, a lot of that area is expected, is under a hurricane warning. And a lot of that area we saw from the wind field map, there it is earlier, could a pretty decent chance of getting 58-mile-an-hour winds or more sustained. So with the latest, where do we have the wind field for? Yeah,
This
okay.
is
That's
the hurricane. This
Yeah.
is sustained hurricane winds, and Lafayette would be right about there. Your chances are probably 10 to 20% Lafayette. I think you're probably going to be fine. Are you going to get some strong winds? Yeah, but you're probably going to end up on the west side of the circulation with the wind from the land. 40, 50, 60-mile-an-hour gusts certainly possible. Power issues, maybe some trees down, stuff like that. But I think the big hurricane push is going to be further to the southeast of you on the wind. In Baton Rouge, you're looking a lot better in Baton Rouge too today. Just the track shifts east have really helped. And here's the 58 wind probability. So chances of sustained 58 mile an hour up around Lafayette, probably 40 to 50%. So, I think you're there, but sustained hurricane, I don't know.
Yeah. Um, Another kind of general question. This comes from Zach. He says he is driving from Houston to Florida this weekend. Will he have any issues? Of course, that's I-10 most of the way. And Zach, if it's this weekend, I think you're going to be fine. All this is going to be out of here. We just went over the hurricane track, but it should be well north. There might be some lingering showers, maybe early in the weekend, something like that. I was looking at the temperatures this weekend. It looks like we went from nice, cool fall is here to back to summer, mid 90s, at least in the southeast Texas area. I'm not sure about over in Florida, but yeah, as far as any hurricane impacts, not as you're driving. There certainly might be some damage and things like that you'll see. And anytime an area has been hit by a hurricane, there's always going to be the issues with power outages, and I think that's the big thing. And power outages apply to everybody, gas stations included. So plan well for your trip as far as fuel and that kind of stuff. And, and everybody in Louisiana in that cone area right there need to plan for power outages. I mean, with Beryl, we had power outages for a week and a half or so. So in some areas, so that is always a factor with hurricanes. All right, let's see. Got another question from Tyler. How much rain should Houston expect? Well, uh, take the Beaumont answer and divide it in half. I would say
Yeah,
very minimal.
it ain't. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to get anything worth mentioning here in Houston. So
We'll get a few passing showers. We actually had a fairly decent little squall move through the downtown area and southeast part of the metro area over the last hour. And I mean, maybe a quarter of an inch of rain. And we'll see. This is not going to be anything that the rainfall is really the main story, especially in Texas. And honestly, even over here, like we talked about, even over here in southern Louisiana, Mississippi, yeah, it's a half a foot of rain. In the urban areas, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, where you have, the concrete and in certain cases the pump systems, that can create some issues, street flooding. But for the most part, this is not the big rainfall that we can get with tropical systems. It's moving pretty quickly. Could have some river issues eventually as this water kind of comes down to Mississippi, the Pearl River, and some of the other ones over here in southeast Louisiana, north of Pontchartrain, and then in Mississippi. Just because of the coverage, right? So if you think about this, the rain's moving up the rivers, right? It's moving inland along the river, so it's dropping the heavy rain all across the watershed. So all that comes back south, but these numbers are not anything extraordinary. There will be some flooding, flood prone areas. Look out, you could have some water, but I think the main thing is going to be the strong winds coming in, and then that surge down there on the coast.
yeah. Here's a fairly loaded question, Jeff, from Maddie. She is asking, why is it that it seems like most of the tropical storms and hurricanes are in the Gulf this year?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah,
I think
it is. It is.
we sort of talked about this. I'm surprised no one's asked the question is where the tropical storms and hurricanes have been. Because it's September 10th and we're on the F name storm, which is what, 6, I think. Is it
Yep.
6? Yeah.
Yep.
So 6. 6 out of 20 we're banging it up for this season. But we did think, regardless of how the numbers shake out in the end, and we're not going to get to 20, but regardless of how it shakes out in the end, we did think this was going to be a Western Basin year: Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, Southwest Atlantic. And while the rest of everything's falling apart out there, that part of the forecast has actually turned out really well. And there's something a little bit more favorable over here in the Gulf of Mexico that has allowed these storms to develop a little bit. Interestingly enough, Francine, unlike Beryl and what was it, Debbie, that went into Florida Panhandle, Francine is struggling a little bit more. But it's also, we're getting, mid-September now in the Western Gulf of Mexico, and things are starting to change. You don't have the same atmospheric patterns in the Western Gulf as you do in August, July and August, as you do in mid-September. Case in point, the frontal system that came through here on Saturday. That's dry air, cool air. I mean, the dew point was 57 this morning in
Yeah.
Houston.
Awesome. Yeah.
A taste of fall, really. And
Yeah.
tropical systems don't like that kind of stuff. But sometimes some of the processes that lead to, fronts getting down into the Gulf and lead to that temperature contrast can sometimes help spin up these tropical systems this time of year. And so, the Gulf is always kind of a favored spot. This year it's been relatively favored. I think, to be honest with you, I think we'll probably get another one or two storms in the Gulf, probably in the southern or eastern Gulf this year. And we'll just have to see if the Atlantic is ever able to produce anything out there. Again, just the stability issues we've been fighting out in the Atlantic have just really handicapped this year. And I think there's a lot of unknowns, to be honest with you, when it comes to those seasonal forecasts. It's just not water temperatures and El Nino, La Nina. There's a lot of other things that play a part into this, and this is looking at the 7-day outlook. And yet again, we had potential with this system that's done, and here we go again with an 80% chance. We'll see, maybe. There's just a lot of sinking dry, well, not really dry, but a lot of sinking and stable air, and tropical systems need the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's another question about travel. We seem to have a lot of travel questions. Helen is supposed to be flying into New Orleans on Thursday. Whoa.
Huh?
That, do you think that that is a good time to fly into New Orleans? Well, my standard answer is to check with the airlines. Number one, that's more of a airline question than a meteorological question. But any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Well, I think the weather will be fine. It's more of a question of, is the airport up and going, and how long does it take the airport to get up and going, and the flights to get back going, and all that. And so by Thursday, I don't know what time Thursday, but I would say by midday Thursday, there's not going to be, the hurricane's going to be gone, and the weather will be fine there. So it's just, can the airport and the local community support the airport being opened. And I don't know. I haven't heard plans of New Orleans planning to close, but I suspect we might hear something along those lines tomorrow, for tomorrow evening and tomorrow night. That it's going to be really hard to get in and out of there tomorrow evening, tomorrow night.
Yeah.
That'd be Wednesday, not Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah. Wednesday for sure. But yeah, Thursday should be fine. Weather wise, it just, it's all about recovery after that. And speaking of recovery, Jeff, when the fatality counts after Beryl in the Houston metro area, a lot of those fatalities came after the storm. Just people doing things that are ill-advised, cutting down tree limbs. There's always down power lines, and it's we always talk about preparation, and that's important too, but we don't really talk a lot about recovery and staying safe in recovery. But those are definitely things to be mindful of. You don't just want to go wandering out and again, you've got down power lines, and you've got utility and local emergency management crews out working, and they need room to work. And so the best thing to do is don't go out unless you absolutely have to. And if you're going to take on any tree cutting or anything like that yourself, I mean, you certainly want to be careful and know what you're doing when you're working with chainsaws and things like that.
Yep, biggest thing now is losing people after the storm hits. It's not the direct impacts anymore. Although you got to be careful with storm surge. Storm surge can still, if people don't leave the coast, storm surge can still be a big killer. So you got to get away from the coast, and you got to get away from the water on the coast. But yeah, after the storm, it's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. It's still the Gulf Coast. It's still mid-September. So it's going to be uncomfortable down there without power. And generators, big deal with generators. You can't put those things close to your house. A lot of people, even with Beryl, are putting them up close under the eaves. That carbon monoxide gets in the house, and that can create real problems. So generator safety, if you don't normally go outside and do yard work, it's not a great time to do it after. Have somebody come help you, or pay somebody to take care of it, because that's where we're seeing a lot of trips and falls and fatalities is in cleaning up the yard and the generator. So you just have to be careful out there. And you also have to know that emergency services are going to be stretched during those times. So if something does happen, you call 911, they may not be able to get to you right away. So really, you got to really, really be careful out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's time to wrap up. We've been on for about 30 minutes now. Appreciate everybody watching the first live streaming of Weather Insights, and a little technical difficulties starting off, but we'll work on that and get things polished up for the next one. We do plan on having another Weather Insights briefing tomorrow morning, so to be sure to be looking out for that. Make sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on. Jeff, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.